All right, welcome to Blueprint of an Athlete, where science meets sports. I'm Dr. Robin West, a certified orthopedic and sports medicine surgeon. Today, I'm joined by two outstanding guests who are helping us change the way we think about protecting athletes' brains. We'll be talking about the Q Collar, the first FDA-cleared device to help reduce the risk of brain injury with repetitive head hits. Dr. Wayne Olan is the Director of Interventional and Endovascular Neurosurgery at George Washington University. He's a nationally recognized neurosurgeon, researcher, and innovator. Joining him is Suzanne Williams, who's a Vice President of Sports Marketing at Q30 Innovations. She previously spent 16 years as Senior Director at Under Armour and brings a unique perspective to player health and safety as a former collegiate lacrosse player. Together, Dr. Olan and Suzanne will help us understand how the Q Collar works, what the science shows, and why this technology matters for everyone in sports, from youth to professional athletes. So welcome, you guys. Suzanne, I'm going to start with you. I want you to explain, what exactly is the Q Collar?
Yeah, well, Robin, it's great to be here. So thank you for having me. Excited to share more about the Q Collar. The device itself is incredibly simplistic, and I really explain it to parents and athletes, whether they're pros or they're amateurs, high school, youth athletes, the same way. And it's that you want to think of the Q Collar like a seatbelt for the brain. It was built to help stabilize the brain within your skull. And what you can think about is when you get in a car, you put a seatbelt on because that seatbelt helps stabilize you in case there's an accident. So the device itself puts about 1.2 pounds of pressure on your jugular vein, and that allows blood to still go up in your head, but as it's coming back to your heart, it backfills about a tablespoon of blood in the veins around your brain. They swell and they act like seatbelts. They take up the extra space in your skull and help reduce the chance that your brain is going to slow. So the device is a Class 2 medical device, and we're super excited because a lot of athletes are using it with great success.
Great. Thank you. Wayne, talking about jugular vein compression, what is it really? And how does that really help? How does increasing that blood volume around the brain actually protect it?
Well, jugular vein compression, Dan kind of touched on it. The simplicity really is where the brains is. Your jugular veins are the most superficial blood carriers in your neck. They're right behind your sternocleidomastoids, which are the big strap muscles right here. And that's where the pressure is gently placed. It's no more pressure than essentially a necktie, but basically what it does, and Suzanne touched on it, is it fills the spaces not inside your brain. Because remember, the venous blood is not inside your brain. It's between your brain and your skull. So it fills those spaces a little bit more snugly, so the brain can no longer move inside the skull at acceleration, deceleration, rotation, things like that. So your brain is held much more tightly. That's all it is. It doesn't raise your intracranial pressure. It doesn't change your CSF. It doesn't affect your carotid arteries. It doesn't affect inflow. It just gently slows outflow. And I think it's very important to make a differentiation between jugular vein compression and jugular vein occlusion. It is not occlusion. Nobody's closing off your jugular veins. It's just gently slowing the flow down a little bit so more blood kind of sits between your brain and your skull, almost like bubble wrap, holding your brain a little bit more steady at acceleration, deceleration, impact, rotation, things like that. So your brain is held much more snugly within your skull.
So can that collar get too tight? And how is that sized, really?
Well, I mean, Suzanne could essentially take you through the sizing, but at the end of the day, the sizing, and there's different sizes for different necks, is all about the right amount of pressure in the right space. And counterintuitively, usually if the collar is uncomfortable, it's because the collar is too big, not too small, meaning it's a little bit more central than it should be, as opposed to being more peripheral. And the collar comes with a sizing and pressure tool that lets you know that it's providing the right amount of protection in the right location. It's pretty simple to put on. Once an athlete puts it on and they start doing whatever they're supposed to be doing, just like anything else, a knee brace, an ankle brace, a wrap, taping, they don't realize that they have it on anymore.
Yeah, Robin, I'll actually demo it for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The device comes in sizes 11 to 18. So perspective, most of your young athletes age 13, 14, 15 are going to be in that 11 to 13, 14, 15 size. Then as you get bigger, they get bigger. Most of the NFL linebackers wear a size 17. Your linemen are going to wear 18. NFL running backs are going to wear 16. So I have a size 11 here, and it just slips around the back of your neck. And every device, we tell athletes you want to have it sit kind of nice and low. Every device comes with a measuring tool. And this is how you make sure you have the correct size and that you're getting that 1.2 to 1.5 range of pressure. Wayne referenced it. It's a little bit more than a necktie. A necktie is about 1. So on this device, you want one tip of the collar to go in the notch And then the other tip just has to be somewhere in the green. And as long as both tips are in the green, that means that you're getting the optimal amount of pressure to backfill that tablespoon of blood. This is important. You keep this, and for as long as the life of the collar, you can continue to check it as your athlete grows.
That seems pretty simple. That's a nice, easy way to do it. So, how does someone order that, like, with the right sizing? Do they just make their measurement with a ruler and then place the order? How do they just order it off the website?
Yeah, great question. You can take a soft measuring tape and literally just make it skin tight around your neck. You keep your chin down or level so you're not looking up and flexing these muscles. And you just get that second skin measurement. So if your neck is like 12 and a half, you get a size 12. If it's 13 and a half, 13 and a quarter, you get a 13. And you just use that measurement as a scale on the website that actually shows you what your threshold would be once you measure it.
And how often do you have to resize that, like, for a growing athlete? And how often do you resize that, or how often do you have to
Yeah,
replace it?
it's a great question. It matters about growth spurts, right? So it's like cleats. Eventually, your athlete can outgrow it. What I say is if they don't outgrow it, the device itself lasts for up to 3 or more seasons or years, depending on how many different sports your child uses it for. But I would say it's really based on just their personal growth. So, I have a high school football player, my son is, and so we're dealing with multiple pairs of cleats sometimes in a season just based on uh, his growth spurts. So keep the tool, keep the collar, and just keep checking it, and you'll notice it, as your child's wearing it, you'll notice it if the tips just seem to be getting further and further apart.
Yeah, okay, that's an easy way to do that. Wayne, so let's go back to some of the science behind the collar. Are there any imaging studies or biomarkers that have shown evidence for its protective effects, or what is the science? Can you share some of that with us?
Well, what's amazing is the science, the data is really, not refutable. Large volume, and you have to study something other than what people might consider to be obvious because there are no tests available that make a diagnosis that of say a concussion. So you have to think of something else. What else can we study against? What else can you study jugular compression against? And so it was studied against imaging, which is even way more sensitive than thinking about clinical diagnosis because people will have imaging abnormalities way before they may have clinical symptoms. And so it was studied against white matter changes or shear injuries. You know this, you're a trauma surgeon. The way you study the brain in trauma is shear injuries because different portions of the brain are anchored differently in your skull. So they tend to move at different speeds when the brain moves. So the common location for an injury is where you have a differentiation in the tissue, gray white junction. That's where you get the shear injuries. We're all familiar with them. So that's what was studied. It's very sensitive. You can count them. So it's right there. You can't miss it. If somebody has no shear injuries and at the end of the season they have something has happened during the course of that season. And that's really what the data studied. There are also studies done with some memory. There are studies done with brain function as well. And in every single study that was done, and to a much larger percentage than was even anticipated, jugular compression really performed in athletes that were undergoing multiple or repetitive impacts. And so the data itself, is really difficult to not look at and be impressed.
And just to add to that, there's been over 25 independent, peer-reviewed, and published studies done over the last 10 years looking at jugular vein compression and how it can help protect the brain. All those studies are out there to be read and to be published. To be fair, that's a lot to ask people to do. And that's really where we've tried to come in and help educate athletes, parents, medical personnel, teachers, coaches, administrators at schools. We really want to dissect that data for them and help them understand what exactly is a TBI, right? That's really the hurdle we face is that a lot of people really just think about concussions and they put everything in a bucket of either I was diagnosed with a concussion or I wasn't. And what we're trying to really get across is, TBIs can happen, traumatic brain injuries can happen, and you don't have to be diagnosed with a concussion. In
Ever,
fact,
ever.
it's pretty challenging to diagnose a concussion. It's very subjective. There's no diagnostic test that absolutely proves you had one, so they can be missed or overlooked. And so what we want parents and athletes to understand is that if you can reduce the chance of a brain injury by reducing the chance of brain slosh, you can help put yourself in a position to avoid a brain injury, whether you're diagnosed with a TBI, with a concussion or not. But to just think, well, I didn't have a concussion, so I'm fine. That's a pretty naive way of looking at it. And that's the barrier where we're trying to get the message out to the athletes.
Yeah, so we talk about these subconcussive hits, right? Or maybe they're not having concussions, but they're having this repetitive injury. And so I always think about, a race car driver or a bobsledder or somebody, or one of the guys in the military, like this repetitive subconcussive head impact. And is that what you're talking about when you talk about this brain slosh? Is that sort of the idea
Exactly.
behind it?
Absolutely, that is what she's talking about. And then if you think about it in the study, not all the athletes were diagnosed with concussions at all during the study, but large percentages of them had changes in their brain. So that comes from quote unquote a subconcussive impact caused that. Like as same as what we just said, is you don't need to be diagnosed with concussion to have a brain injury. 10 different neurologists can give you 10 different opinions. But an MRI is not changing. And if you have white matter changes in your MRI that you didn't have prior to an impact, then it's very hard to discount the effect of that impact.
The largest study clinical trial that was done and is published was out of the Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And they looked at high school athletes, right? So the most healthiest brains you could find, boys hockey, football, and girls soccer. And they found 450 athletes. They MRI DTI scanned all their brains to get a baseline. And then half of those athletes were given Q collars, half were not. And they went out and played their entire seasons. At the end of the year, they re-MRI'd their brains. And they compared the preseason to the postseason scan. And what they found were the athletes that wore the Q collar, 77%, showed zero changes in their white brain matter. So their brain image was the same preseason as postseason. However, the athletes that were not wearing Q collars, 73% showed significant changes in their white brain matter. And those changes were not based on symptoms. So those athletes never came forward and said, I feel dizzy or headachy, or I'm having a hard time concentrating, or, I've seen stars. Those athletes didn't have symptoms, and yet their white brain matter was altered. And that's where we're really trying to get the point across that, this is important for athletes and parents and coaches and everyone to understand. You don't have to necessarily have a symptom to have an injury that's occurred. And then the part that I'm extremely proud about, because Q30 really did this by the book, all those peer-reviewed published studies were independently analyzed by the FDA. And they spent over 5 years doing that analysis. They used their own researchers to look at the data independently of what was reported in the studies. And they felt that there was enough evidence that this device not only is safe to wear, but that it is protecting your brain from white brain matter changes and it's protecting your brain from subconcussive head impacts.
As Suzanne said, the FDA clearance is based on two things: safety, proven, without a shadow of a doubt. There's no reason, nothing. If an athlete can perform in their sport, they can wear the collar. There are no restrictions to wearing the collar. And efficacy. The device is proven to be effective in reducing the effects of impacts on your brain. Again, an FDA clearance is the highest level of clearance you can get for a Class 2 external device. The FDA spent a good amount of time and money figuring that out. And for that, we're really, really proud. But anybody looking at it should look at it and say, all right, safe and effective. If you choose to wear it, you choose to wear it. And as Suzanne said, that's really what our job going forward. Just share the data. Jugular compression works, protecting athletes. Jugular compression works. Choose to, utilize that resource. It's up to you. But there's no doubt about the fact when you review it yourself, jugular compression works.
So that there are no risks. I mean, when people ask you, is there any reason that somebody cannot wear the collar?
There is no reason if an athlete can perform in their sport, that they are cleared to play their sport. There is absolutely no indication where they cannot wear the collar. It does not raise your intracranial pressures. It does not occlude your arterial flows, and it doesn't occlude your venous outflow. It's a slight compression on your venous outflow. That's it. And a slight subsequent retention of intracranial venous blood, but not a rise in intracranial venous pressure.
What is your biggest challenge, would you say, getting athletes, parents, and organizations to really adopt this technology?
So on our end, it's education. It's really breaking down the education barrier, that gap between understanding, it's easy to understand a broken bone or a sprained ankle, right? But it's really hard to understand TBI. And we're really trying to focus on the education portion. And that's where guys like Dr. Olan come into play. They really can dissect and use layman's terms to help maybe have people understand the data because it is very complicated and complex. But as long as we can educate athletes, and then our ultimate goal is to make sure that athletes are aware and educated so they can make the decision that's best for them. And once they have the information, they can decide, is this something I want to do? And what we tell athletes every day, and I work with our NFL and NHL and elite athletes, you know, they do everything they can to have an advantage, right? They eat right, they train right, they
Sleep.
sleep right, they recover right. They're doing everything they can to have an advantage and to put themselves in a position of success. This is the same mindset, right? The best ability is availability, being sharp at the end of the game, having a clear head, being able to sleep at night, all the things that put you in the best position will be your ultimate best, and we tell them wearing this device, wearing the Q collar, which is prophylactic, it's preventative. You got to wear it for it to work. It's like getting in a car accident and then putting your seatbelt on. Doesn't work that way, right? You got to wear it ahead of time. You got to wear it assuming that anything could happen. And if you do that, you're just giving yourself the best chance to be healthy.
Suzanne really touched on it. The athletes who have chosen to use jugular compression to protect themselves, to make themselves available, not just for their families later in life, but for their teammates that week, stay in the game, be available for the game. The feedback that we see from those athletes is passionate about their commitment to making sure that they are the most protected today, tomorrow, and in the future. And that, as Suzanne said, that's one of the great things about hearing them talk about it, hearing them, when they say the difference that it's made, not just in their career, not just in their sport, but also in their life, is really gratifying.
I'm curious about what athletes say. Like, what do they tell you? Do they tell you they feel something, they don't feel it, it's uncomfortable, it's comfortable? What if it's been your feedback?
Yeah, it's varied. A lot of athletes acclimate to it very, very quickly. The practice, maybe not even a practice. Some guys can and girls can put it right on and go. It's like getting used to a knee brace or taping your ankle after an ankle sprain. Like your body just acclimates to it. You don't notice it. It doesn't move. It doesn't change the way you breathe or talk. So it's incredibly comfortable. It's easy to get used to. And then the feedback we get from the athletes is the same as what you get from soldiers. Because remember, this originally was
A
built
military
that
product.
needed to protect war fighters in Afghanistan. And that was the genesis of how do we combat TBI. And so the soldiers have the similar feedback, right? They don't have headaches after a mission, or in football, a lot of our guys will come and say, I don't have a headache after a game.
That was something that I think surprised us, right, Suzanne? A lot of people took into account that they expect headaches were part of it. That's part of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
competition.
Correct. So the biggest feedback I get is from high school football moms who their sons wear it for a week and they come home and they go, Mom, this is the first week I haven't had headaches after football practice.
Hey, that's impressive.
And the moms go, we never knew he was having headaches because that athlete just assumed headaches were a part of the game. We get a lot of our NFL guys telling us that they can watch film the next day longer. They can concentrate longer. We get college athletes telling us, hey, after practice, I can go to class and I can sit through class and I'm more attentive and sharper. We have athletes that'll say, I don't feel any different. I just know I'm protecting myself, but I don't necessarily feel different from the day before, which is great because you don't want to feel different. So it's all varied. And then we've got a bunch of MLS and National Mixed Soccer players. And the feedback we get from a lot of the MLS guys are, I sleep better after a game. You get done playing a long game, you come home at night, you kind of can't calm down. Your body's racing, your mind's racing, you're tossing and turning all night, but you still got to get up the next day and go in and do your recovery and your film. These guys are saying, I come home at night and I can sleep a sound 8 hours. So feedback is all individual, but the common thread is always feel sharper, don't have headaches, recovery's better. And we do get guys who say, I took a big hit and I should have had my bell rung and I didn't feel anything.
Right.
And that's individual anecdotal feedback, but we do absolutely get that all the time.
Must be very, very rewarding to feel that way, to fit somebody for it and then to get that kind of feedback.
It's amazing because you get the feedback from so many different people and it's not like they're talking to each other. And yet the same exact feedback gets
Same story.
given Same
The
story, and people write in wonderful, glowing reviews, 5-star reviews. We don't get returned product, and it's always the same, like, "My son wore it, he had a great experience, he took a hit, and he felt good," and for us, it's not a surprise because the data actually shows that that's what should be happening.
the consistency is really in the passion of the feedback. There's no doubt about it.
And it's so interesting that the feedback is the same depending on no matter what kind of athlete you are. It seems like
It's
you're hearing the same kind of things, whether you're playing football, or you're playing lacrosse, or you're in the military,
absolutely.
whatever that is, it sounds like.
And it's tank drivers. I mean, you mentioned it, right? So guys riding in rough
Snipers,
terrain, it's snipers that are firing weapons in training 8 hours a day. It's rangers that are wearing it for 48 hours while on a mission. Those guys and girls in our armed forces are really exposed to all sorts of traumatic brain injury potential.
vibration, blasts, I mean, breachers, boat drivers. The response has been unbelievable. Suzanne has touched on it. That is so rewarding when you hear about people who are out there protecting us, knowing that we're out there protecting them.
So, Wayne, where is the research headed now? Like, is there what's
Well,
on the
that we
front?
Suzanne just touched on it. The research is headed because now you have the military, and we really have partnered with the military, and the military gives you a massive study base, right? Of different variables, but a lot more subjects. And so now you're starting to see length of wear, vibration, different absolute breachers, kind of Havana syndrome, vibration injury. And she'll tell you a long time ago, somebody made a mention, one of the Joint Chiefs told us, he said, we need a better helmet because we're losing military warfighters to vibration now, to blasts, to, no longer to penetrating trauma. And the response back was, you can get the best helmet in the world. It's not going to stop it. Vibration is going to come through the helmet. And so breach, things like that. So the collar of the brain's inside your skull and it's vibrating. In theory, empirically, it should make a difference. And now using the military, we're going to prove that.
So, if you guys had one message to give to athletes, parents, coaches about brain protection, what would it be?
Well, I know what I would say because I'm on both sides of the problem. And so I know both of you are too, because you both have athletes living in your house. First of all, we already talked about it. There's no risk to this. No risk, no reason you can't. So if it's something you can incorporate into what you're doing, why not use jugular compression to protect you? Not just protect you today, but make sure you're available to play. Right? If you're unavailable to play and you're on the sideline or in a protocol, in theory, someone's going to take your spot too. So make sure you're the most available, but not today, but later you're going to be a family member. You got to go to school. We got to get up in the morning. Got to do our thing. So, there's a huge, huge adaptation and acceptance in the PLL, lacrosse players. Why? Probably because they have other jobs. And these guys have to go on Monday morning and look at financial analyst forms and fill out spreadsheets. They got to be functional on Monday, where maybe other sports might be able to take Monday off a little bit. So we're seeing that. Be your best. You're going to do everything else to be your best. This is an easy thing to try.
Yeah, Robin, I would say, we don't look at football as, the concussion sport. We don't look at football in that combat view that so many people have. We believe TBI is an equal opportunity issue. It goes across all sports. And
And
so
sex,
sexes, and
ages,
I think there's a thought out there is like, well, my son just won't play football and he'll be fine. Well, soccer, there's a major issue with TBI in soccer. I mean, they've actually suggested that children under the age of 14 not head the ball, and if you do, you can only do it for a few minutes at practice every week, because women's soccer and men's soccer have just as high TBI rates. Volleyball, the amount of volleyball players that we have reaching out to us, lacrosse, hockey. This is not equestrian, rodeo, race car drivers, snowboarders, skiers, sliding sports like bobsled and skeleton. Like, this is a issue. TBI is an issue that, crosses all sports, all sexes, and it's not a football problem. And people really need to understand, what is a TBI and how do I protect myself and my children and the athletes in my life? And then we tell them, just please, look at the data, ask if you don't understand it. And then the number one way people find the Q collar is through recommendations. So the large majority of Q collar customers come because someone on their team, a mother, a parent, or a teammate says, I love this. This has made a difference for me. You should get one. And that is how the majority of the devices get sold, because it really is a grassroots, bottom up initiative. People need to hear and talk and experience it. So and it's no different in the NFL. That is the majority of how the athletes find it, is their locker mate next to them is wearing it and they love it. And then they go, well, maybe I should try that too.
That's
what
right.
is it? What is that thing on your neck?
Yeah.
What does it do? It's been rewarding, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's about protecting the athletes and not changing the games. And we'll see if people keep doing what they're doing, and you'll start seeing more and more of it. It's been an exciting venture for sure. Because at least, and you know this, Robin, because you live in this world and you care about these athletes just like I do, just like Suzanne does. And it's nice to know that they're more protected today than they might have been prior.
It's so true. I mean, we have so much protective gear, right? That you wear mouth guards, you wear you wear helmets, you wear gloves, whatever you're wearing, and so this is something so easy to add in.
But the interesting point is none of the other things, have FDA clearance. This is a medical device.
Yeah.
And this has data that supports it. So it's just interesting. Simple, 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 and interesting.
So where can people learn more about the Q collar, Suzanne?
Well, Q30.com has information. It's got all the published studies out there. Go to the website, check them out, reach out to our customer service if you would like clarification or if you have questions. It is sold, though, at brick and mortar stores as well as on the website. So Dick's Sporting Goods carries it. Reach out to your local Dick's. It's at Lacrosse Unlimited. I know there's a lot of lacrosse players out there. So it's at Shields. So if you guys are familiar with Shields, that's a big box sporting goods store as well. So it is brick and mortar. You can go and try it on, or you can go on Q30.com and order one. And then for all the Prime moms and dads out there, it is on Amazon as well.
The last thing is Suzanne won't say it because she's going to be modest, is organizations have come as the entire organization. And somebody from the company would always talk. There's always make time to talk to them, answer questions, put a group on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
If an organization wants to learn about it, they get in touch with her. She will make sure that the entire organization finds out all about it, has the opportunity to ask questions, has the opportunity to ask about sizing, has the opportunity to ask about, the benefits if they're to their program. So the company, as Suzanne said, it's almost all about education. What is the benefit of drug compression and the prevention of brain injury? Period. End. Because it's really kind of initially it's not intuitive. The more you think about it, the simpler it is.
Yeah, it is very simple. It is interesting. So many people think or think about the dangers of it. As you said, and you've explained that it's not, but it's just people get worried about that. I think that's
Well,
what
if going to church and putting on your tie is dangerous, well, then all those guys sitting there passing around, they're passing around the plate. They're getting a bunch of people who are in danger.
There
Yeah,
is something else, Robin, that,
very true.
we hear a lot. And the other thing that we try to dispel is people think, oh, well, if an athlete wears it, they're going to have a false sense of safety and they're going to play more aggressively and they're going to play more recklessly. And I just want to address that. That is not true. The FDA actually looked into that. That was a concern. And there was a study done that proved that athletes that wore the Q collar versus athletes that did not show any change in their playing style or their, thought process. They were not more reckless. They did not play more unsafely. That is what something, people may think happens, but there's no data. And the data actually shows that that doesn't happen. And the way we combat that is I always say, well, when you get in your car, if you put your seatbelt on, do you go 50 miles more than if you weren't wearing your seatbelt? It doesn't change the way you drive, right? Wearing your seatbelt. And, it's one of those things where I'm like, you would never put your child in a car without a seatbelt on. And we would never get in cars without seatbelts on. But I remember not too long ago, a lot of people didn't believe in having to wear a seatbelt. And I was around for that changeover.
My
And
dad cut him out of the car.
I had parents that thought, well, this is not necessary. And now they would never get in a car without a seatbelt.
Very true.
So I always go back to, think about it that way. And then the other thing we always bring up, because, I know people are always wondering, well, why aren't more people wearing it, especially in the elite leagues? Or like, why is adoption not 100%? Keep in mind, it took hockey, the NHL,
It's a
20 years,
great fact.
20 years to get every player to wear
A helmet.
a helmet. 20 years, I'm sorry,
Craig
20 years to get
McTavish,
everyone to wear a helmet. 20 years,
from the time the
right?
helmet was implemented, Craig McTavish played 20 years without a helmet. He was the last player in the NHL to not wear a helmet.
20
It took
years.
20 years for every player to wear a helmet.
The face mask was the NFL, and that took 10 years for every athlete in the NFL to finally start wearing a face mask after it was introduced. So we tell people you can't necessarily gauge everything by 100% adoption, because unless it's mandated, you're always going to have people that, like the way things are. We respect that. We
100%.
understand that. But in our minds, the more research you have, the more reason you understand why it's important to change things when you learn it.
It's really impressive and really just so inspiring, what you guys have done and how you've really tried to continue to push this across sports and help our athletes, to stay healthy, keep
Yeah.
their
And
brains healthy.
we implore people, please call if you have questions, if you want to hear more information, more data, if you need anything, please call. Please call Q30, call the company. We will talk to you. We will give you the information you need.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time. Dr. Olan and Suzanne, thank you so much for your incredible insight into the science behind the Q collar and the science and the head injuries, and obviously all the work you've done to help keep our athletes healthy.
Dr. West, all I want to say, knowing as a neighbor and a colleague of yours, what a privilege it is to be on this with you and for me. And so I really, really appreciate you having us on to talk about it. I know what your reach is. I know how impactful you are. But like I said, the privilege is almost entirely ours. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's our inaugural season. So thank you so much. Our inaugural episode, actually. So
Let's
thanks
go.
for listening. I'm Dr. Robin West. Join me next time as we dive deeper into the science of performance, recovery, and injury prevention. This has been Blueprint of an Athlete, where science meets sports.